ever spoken to a legal and compliance professional must have realized the importance of clarity and purpose in both verbal as well as written communication. Our executive speaker today leads a team of more than 60 legal and compliance professionals located in North and South America, Europe, Asia, and Middle East. He manages all legal matters for Ingram Micro's global operations, including mergers and acquisitions, litigation, commercial contract negotiations, employment issues, corporate governance, and regulatory compliance and reporting. A 1977 graduate of Stanford Law School, Mr. Boyd also earned his bachelor's degree in political science from Stanford University. He's a member of the State Bar of California, the American Bar Association, the Association for Corporate Counsel, and a director of the Pacific Research Institute. At Ingram Micro, we are honored to have him as our Executive Vice President, Secretary, and General Counsel. At Toastmasters, we are even more honored to have him as our guest speaker today, as he will be sharing with us his experiences with public speaking and how improving that skill set has positively affected his career. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Larry Boyd.
Thank you all. Richie, thank you for the invitation. And Milton, it's very good to see that you're dealing with it. I'm an introvert too. You deal with it. I think it was when we were getting ready to have me come here, I think either Ruchi or Amy, there you are, Amy, mentioned that it would be really good if I could put a plug in for Toastmasters during my comments. Unfortunately, I've never been a member of Toastmasters, but my dad was. He, I think it was late 50s, early 60s or something. I noticed he'd come home from work, have dinner, and then, one night a week or something, a couple nights a month, he'd put a suit on, and he's leaving. Daddy, where are you going? Well, I'm going to Toastmasters. What? You're going to have breakfast again? And he said, No, it's son. It's a club where we learn how to speak better. I said, well, why are you doing that? He said, well, I want to be more comfortable in front of audiences and in meetings and leading meetings and everything. See, my dad was a hardscrabble Okie who came out here during the Dust Bowl. And he puttered around odd jobs here and there, even cut hair for a while for a living. About 1940, he was able to get a job as a mechanic at Douglas Aircraft, which is now McDonnell Douglas down in Long Beach. He barely had a high school education. By the time he retired in 1977, about 1 week after I graduated from law school, everybody who reported to him had either a master's or a bachelor's in engineering. So he did something right. But I think, as he started working his way up through the structure there at Douglas, and got off the shop floor and started getting into management positions, he felt a need to improve his skills, improve how he was leading a meeting, working with people who probably had a better education than he did, and he turned to Toastmasters for that. And I think it really did help him a lot. For myself, I've been exposed to public speaking pretty much all my life. I mean, it's something I've always been doing. When I was, a 5-year-old kid, I was watching Perry Mason and the Defenders and all that sort of thing, and I was going to be a lawyer. I always knew I was going to be a lawyer. So it was quite natural for me to fall into speech and debate and that sort of thing, and as early as junior high, leading groups at church, being in speech contests when I'm in high school. I don't know how many of you went to a high school that had a key club. It was the boys, at least back then, it's probably co-ed now, but back then it was a boys' service club sponsored by Kiwanis. And I actually did the stupid thing of raising my hand saying, "Oh, I'll run for recording secretary of the, the California, Nevada, Hawaii district." Little did I know, we all go up to this place in Pacific Grove up near Monterey called the Selamar, and they have this big state convention, and they have caucuses, they call them. They're just groups of high schools geographically grouped together, and they each have a different meeting room around the campus there. You go into this thing to try and give your little stump speech, why I will be a good recording secretary. And the whole point of this thing is to put as much pressure on the poor candidates as you possibly can. I'd be standing up in front of 150 guys trying to say something about Key Club while people are coming up behind me and rolling up my pant legs and tying my shoestrings together. Or they pepper you with insulting questions, things of that nature. I mean, it was like a cross between boot camp and Animal House. But it was a very, very interesting experience, and you learned a lot about sort of standing up under fire. Now, I actually got elected, and that was a good year of meeting a lot of people and going to a lot of clubs and meetings and just talking about Key Club. And the really cool thing for me as a sophomore, junior in high school was talking to groups of adults. One, they were awfully nice to me, because I'm the kid, But to try and sort of speak up and talk to people that are, Mr. So-and-so and Mr. So-and-so, that was a good experience. Got into college, didn't do speech and debate in college, but I had a marvelous experience that taught me a lot about thinking quickly on your feet and putting your arguments together and being logical and standing up for your positions. Had 1 year of con law classes as an undergraduate with a fellow, Professor Robert Horn, and he was a legend on the campus. He scared the stuffings out of just about everybody because he was the only teacher on campus, only professor who taught by the Socratic method. Socratic method is where you teach by asking questions. You don't lecture. You don't stand up in front of the board and just talk. You question. He was the conductor, and we were the instruments. And he played us like instruments. Every class was a symphony. Because after the first couple of weeks, he knew us very well. He knew who the conservatives were. He knew who the liberals were. He knew who the people were that thought, well, you need to read the Constitution very strictly. And the folks that said, well, no, you've got to kind of bend the Constitution because it's got to be relevant to how things are today. And so we'd start the class and he'd start peppering questions. You didn't have to raise your hand because he knew where he wanted to go. Mr. Mooney, tell me about the case of so-and-so versus so-and-so. What did the court hold? Well, why do you think they ruled that way? How do you feel about that ruling? He'd go back and forth and back and forth. And then, running up to the end of the class, he'd ask the last couple of questions. The scales would start to fall from your eyes, and you'd, oh, that's what he's trying to get us to understand out of that set of cases. The bell would ring, close the book, and thus ends the lesson for today. But each one of those classes, you'd go into it, and, oh God, I hope I don't get called on because I didn't read it 3 times. I didn't have time to do that. I don't know it that well. But you did learn to stand up for your positions and try to develop your arguments logically. It was a great experience. Obviously, getting into the legal profession, I spent 22 years with a large law firm here in Orange County, representing my clients in front of mostly judges. A few juries, didn't get as many jury trials as I would have liked. I've had people ask me, how do you compare practicing law here against how it was when you were in private practice? What did you like more? Do you like it more here? Do you like it more there? I'll tell you, I like it more here. This is a wonderful place to work with wonderful people and just really very interesting problems to try to solve. But I have to tell you, as a public speaker, or as somebody who talks for a living, there is no higher high than working with a jury. Knowing that you're talking to 12 men and women who have at least the financial fate. I was not a criminal attorney, but the financial fate of my client in their hands. And you've been with them for anywhere from 3 days to, I had one trial that went on for about 8 weeks. And so you really get to know these people. You've seen how they've reacted to various witnesses during the trial. You did little idiosyncrasies, maybe questions that they're allowed to ask by the judge, or things that they hand up to the judge to ask. So you have a sense of what they're like, and you also got to talk to them a little bit at the beginning when you're going through voir dire, when you're picking the jury. But you're summing the case up, and you see them following, you see their eyes following you. And one thing, I don't know whether you ever talk about rhetorical questions and the use of rhetorical questions in some of your meetings, but it's something that's really underutilized. Instead of talking at people all the time, and instead of telling them what I think, this is how I think you should look at the evidence, you lay things out and then you ask them a question. A rhetorical question is a question that logically suggests its own answer. But the great thing is when you're talking to them, you're asking that question, you put that rhetorical question out there, and you see them go like that. Oh man, I got him. I got him. That is a great feeling. When I came here to Ingram, I thought, okay, well, it'll be quieter. I'll just be in the office, a lot of meetings, negotiating, kind of working things through. Probably won't do that much public speaking. That's not true. And really, the reason all of you are here is because the skills that you're learning, the things that you're trying out, the practice that you get from standing up in front of a meeting like this and talking to your peers is incredibly valuable. And like Milton told you, it's going to help you in every walk of your life, whether you're talking to a friend or colleague, whether you're negotiating across the table on a business deal for your company, whether you're dealing with a car salesman to try and get the best price that you can on a car. You're learning skills and you're learning to communicate that will help you every step of the way. So I actually found lots of opportunities to be able to, well, maybe stand up in front of groups like this, or over in the main meeting room. I had one very interesting experience. I'd only been here about 3 years. Those of you who are Ingram associates and have been here for a long time may remember the old NAI investigation. Yeah, Amy remembers, yes. We ultimately, this is all public now, so I can talk about this stuff. We ultimately ended up paying a fine of $17 million to the U.S. government because of something that had been done here at Ingram back in 98, 99, and early 2000. We had a vendor, NAI's McAfee, that we were their biggest distributor, and they were cooking their books, and they were using us to make their revenue look better. They'd get us to make huge quarterly buy-ins, and then they'd let us return all of the stuff. But we were getting to keep the buy-in incentives and keep the rebates and do all this sort of thing. So unfortunately, we had some folks who aren't here anymore who thought it was a great business model to be able to buy, $90 million of inventory from NAI every quarter, and then return 85 million of it a month or two later, and get to keep all of the incentives. Wow, is this great? Well, the federal government didn't think that was all that great. And we've learned an awful lot from that experience. We've got a lot more controls in place, and a lot of people understand that that evil of channel stuffing, and that particular type of channel stuffing a heck of a lot better today than we did back then. Jeanette back there from Internal Audit she's yes. Yes, indeed. Early in the investigation, we'd been contacted by the SEC, and they had you know, they kind of play their cards close to their chest, but they were indicating that they thought we had really screwed up, and that, you know, we had a lot of explaining to do, as you might say. I didn't see it early on. I really didn't. But we were doing a hard and fast initial investigation to try and get an understanding of the relationship with NAI. And unfortunately, the two vendor business managers that had been most involved on it, they weren't here anymore. They were over at NAI, and they weren't talking to anybody. So I couldn't ask them any questions. But ultimately, I needed to go back and have a first meeting with the enforcement team at the SEC. So went back there. I stayed up till about, in my hotel room, till about, I think 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, going through my notes and looking at things and just thinking about what I was going to say, and jotting down ideas, working on an outline. I got about 2 hours of sleep. Met our attorney for breakfast, and then took the cab, and we're over at the SEC. Okay, they usher you into this room. It was in the old building. It was on the 7th floor. The room is about as wide as this one, but it's a lot less narrow, and it has this huge conference table down the middle. You can sit 15 people on either side. And so the SEC all sits on one side. So there's like 5 or 6 attorneys and 2 or 3 accountants. They're all lined up there, and it's just me, our attorney, and a junior associate from their DC office who was going to be taking notes. And the really interesting thing about this room is they always seat the witness on that side of the table, because this wall over here, with all the SEC guys sitting, so the wall's behind them, the whole wall is nothing but framed photographs and front pages of newspapers of, you know, guys doing the perp walk with the handcuffs on, or the, you know, the overcoat over the wrist so you can't see the handcuffs, or, you know, Boski sent to jail, Milken sent to jail, you know, those sorts of things. A little bit of intimidation going on there. So at any rate, I sat down, and for about 3 hours, I talked about Ingram Micro. I told them our story. I told them, explained the distribution industry, what our place in it was, how we ordinarily worked with our vendors, what quarterly buy-ins were all about, at least from our standpoint, how these various incentives worked in the marketplace, how it was important to get marketing money from vendors to be able to move product through the channel. And I responded to their questions as best I could. And when they had a question that I didn't know the answer to, I said, I wrote it down and said, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. And looking back on it, I said some things in that meeting that turned out not to be true. But the important thing about it was, in my presentation and the way that I dealt with them, they knew that I was giving them the best information that I could, and that I was dealing with them honestly. And then if I found out something was different, I was going to let them know. We ultimately had about a 3-4 year journey with that enforcement team. It took forever for the SEC to get this thing wrapped up. While all this was going on, NAI paid, I think, $250 million to settle the civil lawsuits that were brought against them. They paid $75 million to settle with the SEC themselves. They had a couple of people go to jail. We ultimately ended up paying 17, so, you know, we were an accessory to the crime, as it were, so of course they treated us not as harshly as they did the real perpetrator. But it was, as I said, a learning experience for us. And it was also an experience of a relationship with that enforcement team. There were times when we'd been looking for documents for years and couldn't find them. And then one day we have an office move. Somebody comes into knocks on my door and says, Larry, we found this box of documents sitting in the back of a storage cabinet or something like that because we were moving from one part of the building to the other. And I opened it up and it said something about NAI, so I brought it right over here. Turns out these were documents that the SEC had wanted from day one in the investigation. Companies have been fined. In fact, Bank of America, just the year before, had been fined $10 million by the SEC, not for anything wrong that they had done substantively, but because they had failed to turn documents over to the SEC when the SEC wanted it. So we were scared to death about this. But it turns out that because of the relationship that we had formed with them, starting back with that very first meeting, they knew that we were dealing with them in good faith. They accepted our explanation. We walked them through the documents. And it actually, some of those documents, I think, actually helped us resolve the whole thing and get to the final determination so we could write the check and put the whole thing behind us. So, an instance of public speaking. I do, public speaking in my own private life. March of 2010, the House was getting ready to have its final vote on Obamacare. My wife and I felt very passionate that that would be a terrible mistake for the country. Whether you believe that way or not, the really neat thing about this is that we live in the type of country we have. We jumped on a plane, flew back to D.C. on our own. I took time off from work. And we literally just walked into, one of the House office buildings and we had a list of Democratic congressmen who possibly were on the fence. And we just walked up and down the halls all day long one day, knocking on doors. No appointment. I'm not from your district, but I'm here because I feel passionate about this, and I really want you to know that I think it will be a mistake. Here's why. I think you should, work with the Republicans, come up with, some real market solutions for the very obvious problems we have in healthcare, but don't do this thing. It's going to be a mistake. And you're going to end up getting defeated. We talked to 27 people. 26 of them were gone in the next election, but, it's all right. But it's an interesting experience, and it never even occurred to me you could do that. And probably if I had not been a lawyer for 20+ years or something, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But I'll tell you, while we were in Congress that day trying to talk to people, there were all kinds of just ordinary citizens from Ohio, from Florida, from all over the country that were doing the same thing. So it's not that unusual that you will find the speaking skills that you're developing here help you in a lot of different parts of your life. I've got a few more minutes, I think.
We just want to make sure there's some question and answers.
Okay. I continue to speak, obviously, in meetings here in the company. One thing that I've gotten an awful lot of enjoyment out of, and I think, again, growth personally and professionally, is speaking at lawyer conferences. And it's funny. It's relatively easy once you raise your hand to start getting invitations from other conferences, because I think most people are scared to death to stand up in front of an audience, even people that are lawyers. So you're developing a skill that is going to be impressive and that is going to be useful to other people when you learn to have more confidence, when you learn to be able to get up and express yourself. So I probably speak at 1 or 2 or 3 conferences a year in that sort of way, and turn down several more. So it's something that I will keep doing because I enjoy it, even though I'm an introvert. And it's something where I think every occasion to be able to speak in front of people is a learning experience in a number of ways. We have this thing in the legal profession where, at least I think every state has it. You have to take a certain number of continuing education classes. Here in California, it's X number of units over 3 years. Every 3 years, you have to submit your proof to the state bar that you're still current in your requirements. And it's interesting, if you sit in the chair and you listen, you get 1 unit per hour. If you stand in front of the chair and you talk, you get 3 units. Because they realize that preparing for the speech, mastering the subject matter, giving the speech, and then responding to questions is a great learning experience in and of itself. And that's the recognition of it. So I appreciate the opportunity to stand up in front of you. I had no idea that we have this large a Toastmasters group here and at Ingram, and I think it's great that it's open. I hope when we move you'll still be able to come over. I know it's a little bit more of a drive, but thank you very much for having me.
With that, we're going to open it up for questions. So people, feel free to ask.
Have you ever used a PowerPoint slide, or you just speak?
I've done both. I don't really like PowerPoint all that much. I had one of my... I was leaving the legal profession about the time that, in terms of trial work, I was leaving the litigation profession at about the time that presentation technology was really kind of getting going. I mean, PowerPoint was brand new back in the late 90s. At least it was to lawyers. And, you'd had the O.J. Simpson trial and a lot of stuff with overheads and everything like that. I usually, I'd have a few photographs or charts or something like that for a jury, but I tried to keep it simple. Boy, nowadays, you go over to the federal courthouse in Santa Ana, and every single one of the courtrooms are totally wired. I mean, you've got you sit there, you've got, not only do you have power for the attorneys, you've got the USB ports and everything, and hook right into the LAN for the courtroom, so you can pop things up on the screen in front of the jury. It's very high tech now. But and when I speak to lawyer groups, again, it's maybe 60% of the time I'm just talking. 40% of the time I may have a PowerPoint.
How do you remember your key points if you don't use PowerPoint? Is there something you write down? Do you take notes, index cards? What do you got in your pocket there?
This was up here with the. I jotted these down this morning, but. I used to, when I do a closing argument for a jury, one of the reasons I was up until 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning is I was writing longhand. I was writing my closing argument. I'd get the notes up there in front of me in the lectern, and I'd get started, and then I'd never look at them again. But they were there. They were a crutch. There is nothing wrong about having notes or having the speech written out, but you've got to know it, and you've got to know the subject matter enough, because the most important thing about speaking is eye contact. It really is. So if you've got to sit there and and teleprompters, they're horrible things, because the folks, they really get dependent upon them. And you'll look at, I didn't see the speech Tuesday night, but I'm certain, because this is what they all do. He was standing there, and he was looking here, and then he'd look here, and then he'd look here, and then he'd look here, because the teleprompter is there and the teleprompter is there. Reagan did it. They all do it. But Reagan also had his little 3x5 cards, and he'd write things out longhand. And the act of writing helped kind of commit the things to memory.
Right.
It does for me, anyway. So it's organizational, and it's a bit of a mnemonic device too. Yeah.
Hey, Larry, maybe you could comment a little on, as the general counsel, you go to all the board meetings, and I'm sure at times you speak in front of the board. What's that like? How do you prepare for that? Those kind of situations where you're talking to the board of directors of the company.
Well, I used to prepare like crazy because they all scared me to death. But they're a great bunch of people. Now it's back to the con law class. It's just know your material, and then just wait for the question to come, because you don't know what the question is going to be. There will be a few things. When we've got a particular proposal that we're making to the board that we know is going to be somewhat controversial, or they're going to be worried about part of it. And maybe there's a particular, or maybe we're trying to get approval for an acquisition or something, or what have you. There's a particular legal aspect to it, like, the board's naturally going to be worried, well, geez, we're buying a company in Turkey, or Aptec, the Middle East. What about the FCPA? And so I was ready for my, my 30 seconds or my minute and a half that we did a specific due diligence for for compliance issues. We had a team of people from Deloitte who was headed up by somebody who was formerly with the Serious Fraud Office in the UK, who was an expert on FCPA. They combed through their records. Aptec even made their email server available, so we were able to go into their emails and do word searches for bribe, corruption, bakshish, whatever, and all the slang terms in the UAE and Egypt for bribes and things of that nature, and we didn't find anything, and it's just things like that. So you get prepared because you've only got those meetings move very fast, and we only have a little time for the board to focus on each thing. So whatever you say, it's got to be succinct. It's got to have just the important facts and no extraneous ones. For two reasons. You don't have time for extraneous facts, and if you're trying to make a point, the more extraneous facts you bring in, the more opportunity it gives somebody else to say, well, wait a second, what about that? And then you've gotten derailed and you're off on a tangent that's not important to the matter at hand. So
is there, let me ask you, just made me think of something. So you've got
extraneous
right?
You've got, obviously, different executives have different speaking abilities and styles.
I coach them a lot.
That's what was going to be my question. So if I'm an executive and whatever the proposal is, it's mine. It's like, okay, you need to present this to the board if you want to have their support for it. So do you okay, here's how you talk to the board? I mean, you kind of coach them a little bit. Otherwise, I would think that, especially if you're not, like anything, the more experience you get at it, the better you get at it. But if it's your first time talking to the board, I know I would. Okay, where's the course I can sign up for? How do these people?
Yeah, no, it's insightful. I do that. That is one of the things I do these days. I've actually I have more time now with the board than anybody else in the company. Yeah, we'll have a new senior exec that gets hired, or Jim Garrett, great guy, our head of IS security, and he shows up now as the head of IS security, and guess what? He gets to report now to the audit committee and make periodic presentations. So I sat down with Jim and said, okay, here's what they're interested in. These are the issues in the report that you've given that I think they are going to be most focused on. This right here is what's going to worry them the most, because that issue is in the news a lot these days with boards. You're going to get peppered with questions about that. Do not go over each slide. Talk about the issues. Stay at a high level, but dive down as soon as you get a question, and it's obvious that they want more detail there. So it's the type of coaching that I do. Yeah.
I mean, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, as someone who's a successful leader in this company otherwise, I think it would be a useful thing to know. It could be public speaking related or otherwise.
Man.
And you can email us later.
I can email you later. That is a...
I want a good one.
Yeah, that is a heck of a good question. Probably something my dad told me. And probably just always tell the truth. But thank you for the question. I'm going to think about that one. I really am. Yeah.
I have two questions. For eye contact, do you have any technique or something you can recommend? And second question, I like the way you do your body movement. I think it's very elegant, kind of turny, but any recommendation you can use in eye contact and body movement?
Sure. Eye contact, and particularly, with juries, different people are different ways about, you can tell pretty quickly whether somebody doesn't like to sustain eye contact. And you can only look at most people, and unless you're actually having a conversation with them, you can only look at them directly for, a few seconds at a time. Otherwise, you're going to creep them out. So, it's psychology.
Right.
So try and be sensitive to, how the people are, and how they are, physically respond. The eyes are the window to the soul. So, it's how they are relating to you, and take your cue from that. You got to be very sensitive. Be cognizant of the constant feedback that you're getting. And body language is a big thing too. When we were working with juries, I was in a case once, and the old traditional courtrooms, they have that, there's that rail, between the jury and what they call the well, where the attorneys get to move around. And my opponent came up at one point and put his hands, during the closing argument, put his hands on the well. And the jurors that were seated right there in front, they drew back. And I thought, yeah! Oh, it's good. And so when I'm doing my closing, I go up, hand on the well, and I'm talking to them like that. Go forward. I just, I knew. We got that one 12-0 and pretty quick. So, be cognizant of body movement. As far as stance and speaking, you got to do it according to the audience. You speak to a room full of judges differently than you would a room full of peers. You speak to a room full of children differently, obviously, than you do a room full of adults. And the most important thing is be comfortable. If you are comfortable only standing behind the podium, then stand behind the podium. Don't force yourself out here and be, visibly nervous. Stay here and work on being as comfortable as you can. And even if you never move an inch one side to the other, if you at least look comfortable, you're not, grasping the side, but you're just talking conversationally and making your points, your audience is going to say, he or she, they're comfortable in their skins. They're delivering well, and they're doing a good job. So you don't have to be the master of the space up here. I learned to do that because in a courtroom, you got to wander. You know, you have to. You go over to the jury box or over to the witness box because you're handing the witness something, or you have to go up and you have to confer with the judge. So you got to move around. You have to be comfortable with doing that. Public speaking, being a lawyer, it's acting. If you're being an advocate, you're acting. It is the role of the lawyer to zealously represent his or her client, even if you think your client is a jerk, and even if you think your client's position is wrong, you have to zealously represent them. So you better be a good actor. It really helps if you think your client's a great person or a great company or something, and you think you're in the right. That makes it a lot easier. But you know, you do what you have to do. Yeah.
So when you are faced with a situation where you have opposing perspectives, how do you typically go about finding common ground? Like, is there like a method you use? Is it depending on the situation?
It clearly depends on the situation, but listening really is the best way to find that common ground. The way that somebody says something, you know, even when they're stating their opposing idea or their opposing proposition, how they present it, how they emphasize one part versus another, how they respond to questions or something may give you clues about, you know, where is there some place where I can say, well, what about this? What if we did this? That might get a little bit friendlier reception in terms of trying to move the parties together.
Do you find that it's easier to start from like incrementally finding that common ground, or going to like, so if one person, let's say, you know, one person wants to sell something for $1, another person wants to buy it for $1. If you go halfway in between, that's one way of doing it. The other way is you negotiate and you say, okay, well, I want to go the other extreme and then come back. Do you find one way works better than the other?
Not really. It's too bad Lily's not here. You know, she used to teach a class every year in negotiating skills, and I've never actually been that much of a student of negotiating. Lily really was, and there are specific, and there are great books on the subject as well that you can find. There are specific strategies and techniques for trying to bridge gaps and you know, get to a common yes, get to the, you know, the win-win proposition, which, you know, everybody loves. And would that there were more of those. You know, too often we've got zero-sum games where somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. You win a little bit more, lose a little bit less, whatever. So I usually try, when I'm in a negotiation, whether it was to try and settle a lawsuit or to you know, get together on a contractual term or something, I'd usually let my my negotiating fit the personalities of the parties involved. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Larry, actually, could you just wait for... I'd like to ask Amy and Karen to please come up. We have a little gift for you.
Oh, yeah.
And we hope you display it in your office.
Definitely. Go right up there.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Oh, gosh, thank you. Thanks a lot. It was an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you. And I...
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So again, welcome welcome to come Thursdays at noon in the Mariloma Conference Room. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. And one more time.
Okay. Adjourn.